All right, well, hello everyone. My name is Dina. Like Aaron said, I'm so excited to have you all here today. We are talking about the fun and juicy topic of dating and waiting, which we'll find out what that means in a minute. But essentially just dating in a modern Catholic world. So why am I qualified to do this? So this is, it's kind of real, kind of not, but that is one of my dating app profiles, so sorry. But I've been on 50 first dates, so I am not married, so I'm still in the dating phase, so I'm like actively practicing this as we speak, honestly, like kind of far too often, and I'll show you why here in a minute. That's why I'm qualified to give a talk on dating and waiting. And I also volunteer at St. Mary's in Hudson, and I'm on core with Life Teen and our middle school EDGE program. And I also am a diehard sorority girl, and I still do that for fun. So I talk to college girls all the time. I bring that up a few times in here, so I wanted to preface that with that. And what else about me? I went to University of Dayton, go Flyers, great Catholic institution, kind of, if you look for it. What else about me? I really am here to just share a little bit about my personal testimony and my journey of living and learning in Catholic dating and what that looks like and where I am today. So before I dive into all of this, I want to start with just like acknowledging that there are probably like different groups of people in the room right now. There are people who have like maybe actively dating in a happy relationship. There are people who might be actively dating who are like, I don't know why I'm in this relationship, but yet I am here. Maybe there are people in here who are not dating, but maybe want to be, or maybe you're still discerning if that's what's right for you. Maybe you are not dating and you're content with it, and that's a beautiful season to be in as well. So I just want, like, whatever lens you're viewing this from today, I just really pray that the Lord uses something that I say to touch your heart and mean something to you for whatever season that you're walking through. And if there's things you could store away for later, great. It's the new year, right? So the ins and outs, this is a big trend on TikTok. I do scroll on TikTok for far too long. So this was like a huge thing that was being posted right about now. But the one that I kept seeing, and I'm actually not kidding, set up, yes, but some of them I did steal, and a big one was dating culture. And I was like, wait, I kind of love that formal dating culture is coming back. Like, that's a big step in society. And when I ask myself why, I'm like, that's like, dating, obviously marriage never went out of style. People have been getting married for decades, centuries, I don't know, ever. But since the original wedding, so I guess that's forever. But like the way dating has looked in our world has changed so much in the last 100 years. And I know there are some people in this room who have experienced dating far before there were dating apps, far before there was cell phones. There are people who are like, the teens in the room, like you only know one thing. But I was sitting there thinking about it, and I'm like, wow, this is actually so crazy. So dating is, like I said, is a trend. And I got this text from one of my college girls 2 days ago, and I was like, wow, it's just like the Lord knows what I'm about to do, and I can use this content. Thank you so much, Lily. But she texted me that she was asked on a date, and I'm like, wow, this is major. I love that he asked you on a date. You're 21 years old. This is incredible. And like she was like, I've had a boyfriend and I've never been on a date. I'm like, well, that's also wild. I have so many questions. But then when I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, so why is this now? Like, why is dating a trend again? Why are we asking people on dates again? Why is this becoming relevant? And when you think about what happened 100 years ago, is the invention of the automobile. And I thought this is like fascinating. People didn't used to date before that. It was just called courting. Your families would arrange it, or like maybe like the neighbor down the street. They had no access to other people, and they would just be like, oh, Sally Sue, I would love to hang out with your family and go to the pumpkin patch today. And like they would get to know each other, and they would decide from there if it was somebody that they wanted to spend their time with, and decide if they wanted to date and marry, or they didn't. And the world of dating and courtship back then was very much like very intentional. We're taking our time. We're doing something, like we're not going to do it if it's not worth doing. I don't know, this might be from the 1920s, beats me. They went to dinner. They had to write letters, right? They're writing letters. They would send a letter out, and like actually I was reading some on Google, and it's like people would like be like, I would love to see you again. I hope you're not sick. But like there's no way they got that within the time. They got that probably like a week later. Think of technology. Now, okay, is this going to go off? Now you guys send a message in like 10 seconds. They open it. Okay, how do I fix this? open it in 10 seconds, and then you maybe you open it while you're busy and you can't respond right away, and like your cute love letter you sent on Snapchat is left on open, and then the person on the other end is sitting there freaking out, being like, oh my gosh, why is it on open? He left me on open for an hour. What do? I think this means this. I think this means that. Like the amount of conversations I have with teens about Snapchat is actually wild. Like how it's the end all be all of like that little opened means something so profound. And you're like, maybe they were just, I don't know what people do during the day, like mowing the lawn and they couldn't respond right away. Like give them a time. Imagine pouring your heart out or saying like, I really want to go out with you in a letter that you mailed out and had no idea where it was for 5 to 8 days. Like that's crazy. Like we could never live like that now. And so now that since when cars were invented and dating became like a free-for-all, I can now drive somewhere and go to date, then people started going on these like individual dates. They took dating away, like courtship, right, away from the family. So now we're going off on our own, and that's when it became a little bit more casual. That's when it became a little more like, oh, it doesn't really matter as much, not as intentional, not as purposeful, doesn't really have a plan. We don't have to plan that far in advance. We can just get in the car and go. And so now we are where we are today. So it's been 100 years. I actually don't know if that's true, but it's probably been 100 years since a car was invented. And here we are today. As a lot of things in our world that we look around, things have changed from the way that Jesus intended them to be. And so the theme of today, of going over like at his table, who Jesus was sitting at a table with, who Jesus was dining with. He was dining with the sinners. He was dining with like the people that you wouldn't assume he was. Like, do I think if Jesus was here right now, would he come to this conference? Like, sure, we're all sinners, but there's like a lot of other things going on out in this world. And I love to ask my teens, so those of you who maybe want to answer this, if Jesus was here right now, where would he hang out today? Any of you know? There's not a right answer, Trick. Here. He might be here. Yeah, we're all sinners, so he'd be here. At a bar, thank you. I love to think strip club, yes. Oh, okay, thank you, John. Like he would be in I'm trying to think of the word Pharisee. I was joking about that yesterday. I'm like, I don't even really know what a Pharisee is, but I like do, but I don't. Like, what's a modern Pharisee? Does anyone know? But like he would be, I think Jesus would be like at a frat party. I think Jesus would be at your after parties, after the school dances or the school dance that you maybe didn't go to and just had a party instead. I think Jesus would be at like, I don't know, like that's where he'd be. Like he'd be in the places that like we maybe wouldn't expect him to be, but we know, sorry, I'm doing that to keep this thing awake, keep sleeping. Like the places that we would like least expect him to be, but like that's where sin is today. Like there isn't like what it's said in the Bible, like translating that to today. And I really think that God's plan for what he had in mind for dating and marriage and like the sacrament of marriage, like and how we get there is so far from where he wanted it. But as everything in this world, Jesus does redeem it all and make it good, as long as we're willing to look at it. And as the pendulum swings, like as one thing goes up, it must come back. So as we've swung so far away from what Jesus intended for dating, we're now coming back to what I think is, this is again according to me, so don't cite this as any sort of anything else, of what dating should look like, and what he maybe intended it for it to look like in a modern world. So if we look at this chart here, there's singleness, dating, engaged, married, and then ultimately heaven. So if we're saying like what even is dating? Okay, so I'm going to read this on the slide. It says dating is not a status to dwell in, but a process to move through. It's a series of actions meant to lead us to a particular end, discerning whether or not we are meant to marry a particular person. Dating exists for evaluation. So I think it's important to note that like dating is not meant to be like we're not there for a long period of time. Like we're not dating someone and then like that's the end all be all. Because ultimately what we're called to in vocation is at heaven through our vocation, in heaven, not at. It isn't like a GPS location. So if we're ultimately meant through our vocation to end up in heaven, then and we're called to, that's something we should all be praying through, of like, are we called to marriage? Like this is how we get there. So if we're looking at our vocation here on earth being called to marriage and that's how we're getting to heaven, then we have to go through the processes to get there. So like making sure that like dating, like understanding what dating even is. It is an intentional discernment that we are moving through, not just sitting in. And I know you guys are in high school, so we'll bring that back in a second. I also recognize in today's world that it doesn't just go from like single to dating, because there is the stage that is between being single and dating. It's the stage that like a lot of you tend to sit in for like a really long time, and I'm also guilty of this, so like preaching to my own choir here, because it's like, you know, awkward to do the hard thing. But like, let me just say, like, the stage that comes before dating, like what dating isn't, okay? Dating is not snapping. It's not the like, oh, well, like we're not official, but like we are official, but like I'm not really sure, like we haven't like defined it, but like, you know, like we're just like in between. Situationship, great word, love that. I love when I'm like, so what are you guys? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, that's not helpful. Friends with benefits also, like I'm like, why are we acting like we're dating, but you're not, there's no label on it. A keyword, this little in between single and dating, like obviously like you don't just like walk up and you're like, hey, want to date? Like that'd be kind of weird. So you have to like talk to somebody. I didn't mean that at you. Yeah, I just like an example, okay? So if you were, it's a stage, okay? So like that little phase, that little talking phase, the snapping phase, like that also shouldn't be like, it isn't meant to sit there for a long time. It's a stage, not a place to stay in. That should be something short term. I have made the mistake of too long, and then guess what? Like it ends up fizzling out, like it doesn't work, and we'll talk about that. Yeah, so and I tend to tell my teens who are like, yeah, like he just doesn't want to commit. We like haven't had that conversation. I don't really want to have that conversation. I don't really know if I want to date. Like I'm not into dating. I just want to like stay here. I'm like, okay, well, if you're not willing to go to that next stage, like then like you're not doing anything. It's going to end in failure. And we'll talk about that with like actually being in an intentional relationship as well. And I think if you find yourself in this stage and you're like, okay, like I don't know where to go next, I don't know how to go to the next place, maybe I don't want to go to the next like stage, I don't want to actually date them, I think that should be the biggest red flag in your head if you're like, okay, I'll use snapping for an example. If I'm snapping someone for like, and it's like flirty snapping, if I'm snapping them, like you know this is like more than just friendship, for like a long period of time, and you're like, yeah, I don't want to date this person, then what are you doing? Okay, the answer of what you're doing is you're doing the wrong thing. You're using them. You're using them for attention. You're leading them on. You're doing it for the wrong reason. Because if you're not ready to go to the next stage, then that's the red flag in your head to be like, I'm not ready to date. And I think I know that's okay. Like you don't have to be ready to date. And like take that into account throughout this too. Like just because we're talking about dating doesn't mean that like you have to go out tomorrow and like be ready to date. Like I'm 16, suddenly like my parents said to date when I was 16 and I could drive. Like I'm ready to date. Like that doesn't mean you're ready to date just because on paper it sounds right or that's what everyone else is doing. It's okay to use that like feeling of being like I don't want to commit. I don't want to go further to be the red flag in your head. So that's committing to the next stage of going beyond the snapping, talking, if you find yourself stuck there. But then it goes on to dating. So I know talking about marriage in high school, when I was in high school, I had my wedding planned. I am 30, so like just so you know, it didn't happen yet. But y'all will be invited when it does. But it's changed since my original plans, just in case you were wondering. But like thinking about marriage in high school seems so crazy and so far away. But really, if you're not dating with your eyes on forever, then you're dating to break up. Like if you're not dating with the intent of marriage, like even though realistically, I actually think it's illegal to get married in Ohio before you're 16. Yes, maybe 18, I actually don't know. But like, so even though that is far away for you, it's logistically far away for you, it's maybe not realistic for you, you can still be looking at it with your eyes on forever. You can still be looking at it with the intention of like, okay, this is going to go somewhere further. And like I said, if you're not dating with your eyes on forever, I love this phrase, then you're dating to break up. That's the only option. And so if you're sitting here thinking to yourself, wow, I'm in this relationship right now and I would never marry this person, then just take that as a sign to yourself and pray about it later. I've also heard through a lot of teens, I've heard it through my friends, there are a lot of wrong reasons to date. I can go through a laundry list of wrong reasons, from being like fear of being alone forever, popularity because I'm the head cheerleader and they're the football player because we're both in band, like I just want the validation, I want attention, Maybe this is the only guy I'll ever find, or the only girl I'll ever find. Like maybe someone else won't come along. I think everyone else is having this level of like love and intimacy that I'm not having. Like I need that. And here's the thing. There is a million wrong reasons to date, like absolutely a million. But there's only one right reason to date. And the right reason to date is to find a spouse. And when I think of like my journey of like I also volunteer with 8th grade girls at middle school youth group Edge in St. Mary's, and all my middle schoolers right now have girlfriends. They have boyfriends. They're all girls. They all have boyfriends, and they all wear their like charm necklace of their name, and they're like so excited to tell me. And then like they're like, yeah, so like Joey's on the football team. Like we all went and took pictures, and it was so fun. And I'm like, that's so great. Do you guys talk? And they're like, oh, no. We like took a picture together, and I'm like, oh, so like do you guys talk about anything? And they're like no. I'm like, oh, okay, so like that's a good relationship, right? And then like 2 weeks later, they don't have the little J charm on their necklace, and I'm like, oh, where did Joey go? And they're like, oh, well, Ella broke up with him for me because like we weren't really talking, and like we just like didn't really, it wasn't like, I don't know, like I didn't even know, like maybe he doesn't even know we're broken up, but like it wasn't it anymore, like we've moved on. And I'm like, that is some of you I've actually known in middle school, and that's some of your middle school dating stories too. But that's like dating without purpose. Like there's no like they aren't in middle school, you're not, like what is the purpose of dating in middle school? Like it is marriage, thank you. But like they are not, my little girls are not thinking about that. They're dating because they're like, oh, he's on the football team and we could take pictures with all of our friends after the game. The 8th grade J, whatever it is, B team. But so cool. They would be mortified that I was roasting them. But dating without purpose is like getting in a car and being like, okay, I have nowhere to go, and just sitting there. Or this is my favorite that high schoolers give me. They're like, it's just something new to try. I want the experience. I'm like, okay, great. That is an amazing reason to try a new appetizer at Applebee's. Amazing reason, because you want the experience. Like, yeah, I need to know what their new deal of the wing combos are. Okay, but that is not a good reason to date somebody. Like those are two different things. And then inevitably, when you do date someone with that reason, because there is no purpose to it, then you end up losing interest, or I just don't feel it anymore, or my favorite, which I actually do this myself, but like getting the ick. You're like, oh, that just really icks me out. And you know what? Like losing interest, that's a great reason to stop watching a TikTok. Like that's a great reason to scroll to the next thing. Not a great reason to break up a relationship. Like, can I imagine if my parents woke up this morning after 35 years and they came to me and they're like, hey, actually, we've just lost interest. And I'm like, oh, it's interesting. Like, how? Like, not a great reason to break a relationship. So if you date for without purpose, if we're dating without the intention of marriage, if we're dating without like the idea of like going to that next level, then like it will always inevitably get old. It will always inevitably fail. And you'll never, sorry to break this to you, but you'll never find love that way. No matter how perfect someone seems, no matter how amazing the relationship looks or could possibly be, you'll eventually get that ick. And like that should be the sign that like, okay, what I'm basing love on is off. Like that is a complete wrong version of love. So then that brings us to the question of what is love? Okay, what is love? That's a great song. I'm not going to sing it for you to save yourself. But writing down, if I like asked, okay, wait. So if so I sorority girl, right? I had all my college girls, our philanthropies hearts, they write on these little hearts of things they love. Okay, and I had them all put them on the wall. I go up to them, and I'm not entirely sure what I was expecting them to write. And they all wrote like little things like, I love tacos, I love barrio. Okay, those are the same thing. I love horses, I love music, I love traveling. What do you love? Mexican food, yeah, those are all in the same category. I love pasta. They were all writing like things that they love. And then like there's this sweet girl who like wrote, I love my sisters. And I'm like, who wrote this? Like you have a heart, like I want to talk to you. And in that moment, I was like sitting there thinking to myself, and I'm like, that is actually so true. Like every other language has all of these different words for love, except for us. Like the way that you say in Spanish, I love you to your mother is a different way you say than I love tacos. The way that we say in English is just like the word love. And after a while, when you say a word, like, you know how it just like loses its, like, you're like, what does that even mean anymore? What was I typing yesterday? And I was like, I was typing some word 100 times over. Oh, piano. I'm like, what a weird word. The more you type it, you're like, what is this? Like the word love, the more you type it, it loses its allure, right? Like it loses like its meaning. You're like, oh, it just means, I like it. I love it. Sounds good. I love my outfit today. But the way I love my outfit today isn't the way that I love my dad or my mom. So like that brings me to the question of like us being confused what love is. And so when you look to the Bible is very clear about a lot of things. God doesn't speak in like roundabout in gray area. He speaks in black and white. Everything he says in scripture is for us to be taken, like when not to be taken 100% as truth, but because every book of the Bible, you read it differently. So it's all true, just you have to discern it the right way. Okay, anyway, but when we read the Bible, it's not like, oh, the book of dating, and it gives us this whole list of like how to date. Actually, weirdly enough, there is no dating in the Bible, which is something I recently have learned in a book I was reading, and I was like, that's actually so interesting. You never hear about them dating. They either have arranged marriages, or some of them capture their wives from other countries, so don't suggest that, because that's actually illegal. Wasn't then. But when we look at God uses it, like that doesn't mean that the Bible doesn't have a description of what he wants us to do in 2025. And he's very, very clear about a few things here, and one of them is love, okay? So when God talks about what love is, he only talks about what authentic and real love is. And the best example of it is right here. I know this is actually a really bad crucifix, but don't worry. Well, there's one right there, so that worked out in my favor. That is what love is. That is what love is. It is a sacrifice. Love is Jesus. And in the Bible, obviously, God is love, which means Jesus is God, so Jesus is love. And when we're looking at like what the act that Jesus did, like I will bring that back here in a second when we talk about the favorite juicy topic of sex. But when love is a sacrifice. Love is like authentic, pure love in our world has been blurred out. It has been changed to all of these versions of fake love that we've fallen for, we've been victim to, and it's not our fault, it's the world that we live in, but it's up to us to be able to look at like what does true authentic love look like, what does true sacrificial, willing the good of the other love look like, and just like I keep saying, it looks like that. And love is beyond feelings, and I think that's like in every stage of life, I think it's really easy to get caught up in the feeling of it all, right? Like, I mean, I talk to girls most of the time, but like girls have a lot of emotions. We feel a lot of things, and it's easy to be like, I just don't feel it anymore. I don't feel these things. That's the losing interest I was just talking about. And if we don't feel, like, love has to go beyond feelings, because imagine if, again, my parents woke up this morning. I don't think they feel the same way they felt when they met 35 years ago. Actually, today, fun fact. Like, I don't think they felt the same way when they first laid eyes on each other at a ski resort. Like, I think my mom might wake up some days, look at him and be like, what? Like, how did that happen? And if love was based on feelings, girls, I don't really know what it's like to be in a boy's head. Don't want to be. But I know what it's like to be in a girl's head, and there's a lot of feelings going on, a lot of emotions, a lot of things. And like if you changed your basis of love every time you felt something different, like you'd have no idea what was going on. You would be like every which way. You'd be like, oh, today I love this. Tomorrow I love this. That's my sign that I've been talking too long, is when the screen goes off. But the world is going to does and tries to convince us that love is just merely a feeling. That we should base everything on the feeling, an emotion of love, and if we don't, then love can't really exist. But if you think about if God is love, like God doesn't just base his love for us on feelings. God doesn't base his love on like, oh, I just decided to show up today. God didn't show up today and say, hey, because I'm here is when I decided to love you. Like, no, God, that's not how God works. God is ever present, ever loving, and every single day God wakes up and makes the choice for us to be loved by him. Well, he doesn't wake up, because I don't think that's how he works either, but whatever. Love is, Jen's laughing at me back there, which just really gives me, anxiety. So love is a sacrifice. Love is willing the good of the other person. And this is the best example of it right here. So when we're looking at these different forms of love, okay, this is called the love test, or it's called, just in my head, 3 different types of love, of calling out fake love in this world. And when we're looking at, like, I think of all of these relationships I've been in, and I will talk about them, don't worry. But these are the three most common that I have personally encountered. The I love you if. Okay, so this is the, just to give you the conclusion of this, the I love you if and I love you because are fake love, and I love you regardless is authentic love. But I love you if is I love you if you are able to do something for me. I love you if you can make sure that you love me in this way. I love you if you provide this for me, if you do this to me. I love you if anything conditional, okay? So anything that's conditional and that's where your love is earned, that is fake love. That is an abusive relationship. That is you're trapped. You feel like there's no way out. That is a quintessential version of like what a very unhealthy, hurtful relationship looks like in this world. I love you because is probably the more common one I hear high schoolers have. This is like, this is what my middle schoolers I was talking about. I love you because I did have a boyfriend. Well, I had two boyfriends in college. One of them was for like 12 and a half minutes, and it was because I was the president of my sorority and he was the president of his frat, and it sounded so good together. But really, that's why we liked each other, because we were something at that time. But it's the type of love that you see in like celebrity relationships too. You know, like every good movie comes like add the PR afterwards is about somebody being in a relationship, and you're like, wow, this is such good press for the movie because now they're dating and there's all this drama around it. But they're like, I love you because is something that you are or something that you can do, something that is fleeting because it will go away. I love you because you're blonde. I love you because you're the high school cheerleader. I love you because, I'm trying to think of another example. Okay. You get the point. But that's also a selfish type of love. That isn't authentic love. That is another version of fake love. It's focused on what it gets from you, which is selfish. And then we go to the last one, I love you regardless. So this is the I love you regardless. This is what every marriage should be. This is the most beautiful, like authentic form of like how you love someone. Like this is, I love you regardless. I love you regardless of what happens. This is a healthy relationship. Even if you are no longer the star football player, even if you're no longer the fraternity president, even if you're no longer something, I love you regardless of that. Nothing you can do earns my love. Nothing you can do for me earns my love. Christ on the cross is the perfect example. He said, I love you regardless. I will give up my life for you. I will lay down my life. I will offer you my body. It is, I love you regardless is what we say in our wedding vows. As Catholics, we repeat them every single time in every single oh, hello. Is this still? Okay, there. It was beeping. Okay, so it's the type of love, that's reflecting our wedding vows, and it's the kind of love that God has for us. So if you're in a relationship or you're like discerning a relationship, actually this is probably more if you're in it, and you're like saying I love you, that is kind of a big deal. Those words shouldn't be said lightly. And looking at your relationship and saying like, okay, what kind of love is this? Is this true, authentic love, or am I playing the game of like what love has been dulled down to? And I think this is a great way to look at it. But then like when we're looking at what love is, we're like, okay, like how did we get this love? So obviously the answer to that is the author of love is God himself. And like the Bible is literally a whole love story, which is actually pretty cool. And there's some really awesome parts of the Bible that like if you really read it and dive into it, it's like this romantic, poetic love story written just for you. And so when I was in high school, I went to Life Teen and I didn't really date at all. I went to like dances with people, but other than that, I like had my guy friends that like my girlfriend group was friends with, and that was that. And all my friends were dating other people, but I didn't really like, there was just no one, I don't know, there was no one I found myself interested in. Honestly, I was content with life. And when I think I was like 16, we had a program at Life Teen talking about chaste relationships, so like saving sex for marriage, having the reverence for like the meaning and the sanctity of what sex is. And I remember I was sitting there and I was like, sure, sounds great, love this idea. It wasn't on the horizon for me. I was like, I'm not dating anyone, I don't see myself, there's no one I'm interested in. So like, yeah, why wouldn't, I mean, if the church says this, if the church believes this, like why wouldn't I save myself for marriage? In fact, when I was 16, I wrote a letter. We sat down in our pews after the end of that. We wrote a letter to our future husbands. Honestly, I shoved it away. I'm still kept. But I recently did just find it, and I'm so glad I did, because it was not me writing. It was definitely the Holy Spirit. It was so beautiful, and I like brought tears to my eyes to be like, wow, 16-year-old me thought that. But I listened to the facts, and I'm like, yeah, I'm down. This sounds great. I'll save myself for marriage. I get to college and I meet the cutest. It's freshman year, like it's so fun. Like I grew up in the same town for 13 years. I'm meeting all these new people, which is like just a sea of like amazingness. You're like, wow, friends. And I meet all this group of boys that my hall friends were with, and there's the sweet, cutest boy in the world. His name's Matt. I was like, I love you so much. Not really, because, using the word love wrong. But like, I was like, he's perfect. Like, he went to Catholic school. He's a twin. He's so fun. He's so energetic. I need to get a charger for this or something, because it keeps going. And I was like, he's perfect in every way. Like, I just have the biggest crush, which is like the first time I was like, oh my gosh, like I like desire being in a relationship with him. And as time goes on, like, I've flirted with him. We were like, hey, we both like each other. We had every class together, and we start dating. And he asked me to date him. He was like, he didn't say, will you be my girlfriend? He said, you want to be exclusive? And I was like, duh. This sounds so great. And that was my first boyfriend. It was freshman year, all exciting new things. And as I started like learning what it was like to have a boyfriend, I was like, okay, now I have to share my time. I have to talk to him all the time. Like, should we get dinner? Like we're in the dining hall. I was like, wow, there's like a lot to a relationship that I like didn't think about. And so then all my girlfriends are like, Dina, oh my gosh, how's dating Matt? Like, this is so cool. Like, how's it going? Like, have you guys kissed? I'm like, yes, we kissed. It was like amazing. It was actually in front of, he lived in the door, oh my God, why am I blanking on the name? Mary Crest, and there was like a Mary Grotto, and I was like, it was so perfect, it was so beautiful, it was everything I ever dreamed of. And then they're like, okay, so like, when are you having sex? And I'm like, what? I didn't even think about that. They're like, wait, what? They're like, wait, you didn't already? I'm like, it's been 6 days, like, what are you talking about? And I was like floored by this idea. So I was like, I mean, no, we're not doing that. I don't know. But we didn't talk about it. That was like, I just knew my friends were like, yeah, we all do that. I'm like, oh, okay, like little shocked. So then comes the time when I mean, like we had dated for like a few months, and Matt was like, yeah, so are we going to have sex? And I was like, what? I was like, no, I thought we were both on the same page. And he was like, no, I've had sex before. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I was shook to my core. I was like, wait, no, I said when I was 16 I wasn't gonna have sex. And I was like, but you know what? I'm like sitting there thinking to myself, I'm like, well, everyone else has, like, should I do this? Why do I believe that again? And at that same time, I was in another journey of like struggling with self-image and myself, and I was like, I couldn't imagine Matt looking at my body. I couldn't imagine anything like that. And so I was like, no, I looked at him and I firm in the face. I'm like, no, I'm saving sex for marriage. He was like, okay, why? And I was like, because the church says so. That was my only answer. I couldn't elaborate. I didn't know why. I just said, yeah, the church says so. It sounds good to me. When really in my own head, I was like, I'm using that as a cover up because I like really just don't like myself right now, and I need healing there. But then the church was my scapegoat. So time goes on, I call my priest friend, Father Patrick Schultz, and I'm like, hey, can you remind me why I don't want to have sex? Like, I just need he was like, this is the weirdest phone call I've ever gotten. He also was a deacon, I think, like he wasn't even, or not even yet. And he was like, sure, 20-year-old girl, let me explain to you. And he started explaining to me like what a chaste relationship looks like, how it's not that sex is bad, it's not that sex is like something that we shouldn't be desiring. It's that like the virtue that it takes not to have sex, the reason that we shouldn't have sex, the reason why God designed sex for and to be in the context of marriage, and he started explaining all this to me, and I'm running out of time because, when I time this myself, I don't talk nearly as much. And so he starts explaining this idea of a chaste relationship and how it's not I shouldn't be towing the line of okay, well, this is a sin and this isn't a sin and we should categorize all these things. It really is this how are we glorifying God by being together? How are we glorifying the Lord in our relationship? Are we heading towards his glory, or are we both leading each other to the confessional? And so that's where my favorite question everyone asks is, how far is too far? And so I started, Father Patrick Schultz gave me some books to read on theology of the body, which is really where I fell in love. I have some resources at the end where I fell in love with the teaching, and I started to learn my why. I started to learn why I wasn't going, why I didn't want to have sex, why I didn't want that for myself. And as, Matt originally was yeah, I've never done that. I don't know what that's like. And I'm well, let's do this together. And by the grace of God, Matt said, yeah, let's do this together. And he was into learning with me. And so quickly into our relationship, he was so, okay, well, if we're not having sex, then how far is too far? And I called Patrick again. I'm hey, Father, he wasn't a priest, so Patrick. Hey, Patrick, what? How far is too far? And he laughs again. He's I'm in a grocery store. Can I call you back? And I'm yeah, sure. He's not something I want to have in the aisle with a seminary t-shirt. Yeah, great point. So then he comes back and he's okay, so the fact that you're asking the question means it's too far. And then at the end of the day, it's anything can be too far. Kissing can be too far for some people. It's what is the next step? What is it preparing your body to do? Anything preparing your body to take it further, anything preparing your body for sex is too far. And for some people, kissing can be too far. Everybody's different. And he was at the end of the day, it comes down to the communication that you're having. So the answer to this question is communicate. Communicate with yes, any oral sex, any of that actually is a sin and too far. But on the topic of kissing or making out, that can be too far if it's bringing the other person's body to get aroused and ready for sex. And that's where communication comes in. So talking to your significant other that you're in a relationship with, and having some sort of verbal or nonverbal cue to be okay, stop, this is done. And this was actually Matt's idea when we were dating, when we had this conversation, and he goes, okay, well, if it ever gets too far, let's just give each other a kiss on the forehead, and we don't have to say anything, and that just means we're done. And for me at that time, that was the biggest grace I could have ever received, because I had no idea, until I was in that situation, what that really meant and what that looked like. And so, as our relationship went on, we talked about it so many times of okay, this is too far, this feels too far, and at the end of the day, we only ever ended up really understanding our communication skills and really knowing our hearts as opposed to knowing each other's bodies, and that was the biggest gift that we could have ever gotten. But that doesn't mean that your desire to want to have sex is wrong. That doesn't mean that your desire to want to have sex is incomplete or weird. In fact, your desire to have sex is so good, and you should. It's probably weirder if you don't want to have sex with them. But your desire that reveals how the Lord designed you, and that is what, he designed sex so beautifully and so good. But he designed it so intentionally and good that he wanted it done in a certain context so you could experience it in its fullness and in its glory. Again, I'm not speaking from actual experience here, but I've said, Matt and I got to know each other's hearts instead of our bodies, and that was the most, that was intimacy. I knew more about Matt than any of my friends knew about their boyfriends. People would look at us and be you guys are having so much fun, and I'm yeah, because all you guys are worried about is going home after this. We're having a good time and communicate so well with one another, and the radiant joy that a pure and chaste relationship puts out into the world, that is what glorifying God is. And when God meant to save sex for marriage, it wasn't because it was bad, it was because it was this really great thing. And it's not that he was I want to be a killjoy, this is so fun and feels good, so no having fun here on earth, you're not doing that. That was the opposite is true. In fact, he was it was so good, I want you to love this and experience it at its fullest potential. I love this analogy of using a Lego set, which is like such a dumb thing and it dulls it down so much, but to me it makes so much sense. When I was little and I was given this Lego set and has like 150 jillion pieces, and I'm looking at it and my dad's like, are you gonna read the directions? I was like, heck no, I'm not. I can see the picture on the outside of the box. I'm gonna build this castle. And it looks great. And I build this castle. It looks just like the picture on the box. Okay, it looks exactly. And I then at the end, I'm like, looks great, but why are there like 30 extra pieces in this box? Like, what was this meant for? And I had no idea. I looked at and then my dad's like, you should probably look at the directions. I think you're missing something. I opened the directions and I'm like, wow, I had no idea that this inside of this Lego castle I built, there was supposed to be a slide. There was supposed to be a grand foyer with stairs and these like bedrooms upstairs. Like, I didn't know there was supposed to be this whole internal thing. And like, I didn't know, I didn't get to experience that, why I had to unbuild it and then rebuild it. But like, I didn't get to experience it in its glory. I didn't get to experience it to its fullest extent. So like that, I mean, sex, again, much more difficult topic than that, but like food and sleep are good, but they have their limits, right? Like the gift of sex has boundaries as well. The boundary that God designed for that is marriage. And when it's taken out of marriage, is when it's like taking a fire out of a fireplace, right? It's like something beautiful and good can easily start to destroy. I could sit here forever and explain to you the science behind it. There's so much science, which like even more proves the existence of God, because like no one could have thought of some of the things that he did. And I could sit here and try to convince you all day long that this is why sex was meant for marriage. But to go back to Christ on the cross, we hear this during Mass too, but like, this is my body which is given up for you. Do this to remember me. And like, if me is Jesus, do this to remember love. Do this in honor of love. Do this for love. And if Jesus' last thing that he gave us on earth was his body, the last thing he did, I mean, this man he brought people back from the dead. He cured the blind. He did, like, honestly, wild things that like made water into wine. But the last thing he did to show us that he loved us was gave us his body. And that's what the Lord calls us to do too. I know I'm like at the end here, but people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So much like my story, like no one was like just saying just because the church teaches this isn't going to help you save yourself from marriage. And if you like, it's not gonna. In fact, you're just gonna be pressured, just like Eve was in the garden that day. It's so temptation and the devil are a very sneaky thing, and they can make it sound so good, and fake love can look so like almost like real. So like, what is your why? Really praying about and asking the Lord, what is your why? Okay, I'm gonna skip over this and to the end here. Okay, so just some practical tips for dating. First of all, pray about your relationship. Bring prayer into your relationship together. Committing, okay, I didn't get into that analogy, but don't be a hypocrite to yourself. So your mind, heart, and body should all be speaking the same language. Establish boundaries in the beginning. Speak in black and white. That was my mistake in the beginning. Me and Matt didn't establish that right away, and it was like this awkward thing. But like, no one can read your mind. Just talk about it. So you have to open the door to talk about things. Have conversations in person. Have a foundation of friendship. That's the most helpful thing you can do. And protect their heart for their future spouse. A beautiful end to that story of Matt is when we broke up, I was heartbroken for a minute. And ultimately, I knew it was best for both of us. But his wife did text me on their wedding day and thanked me, which I think is actually really wild, and I was mind blown by that. But it just shows how the Lord used our relationship for good, and protected his heart and my own. Avoid any environment that will let you know or tempt you to sin. And again, know your why. So praying about what's your why. Like my why is because, I mean, I actually have a lot of whys at this stage of life, but like my why is because I know that living a chaste relationship is worth the wait. Like I know that what God has and God's plan for me is so much more beautiful than anything I could fall for here on earth. Okay, flags in dating. This is just some fun ones. Okay, and then I'll let you go because I think I'm over time now. Oh, I am? Okay, well, 1 minute. Okay, so don't hang out alone. Don't go to places that you know. Like my favorite is when teen girls are like, something really bad happened last night. I'm like, well, then why'd you follow him into a dark basement? Like, what were you doing? Why did you sneak out at 2 in the morning and go sit on a park bench at 3? Like, what? Like, what were you doing? Why did you get in the car and then just let him park in a parking spot? Like going on car rides with no destination. Like if you can't watch a movie alone, then maybe you shouldn't be watching a movie alone, or going to a drive-in movie. Like if that leads to the intention of sin, if it leads you to tempt you, then you shouldn't be going there and stopping yourself before you get to that place where it's awkward. Because my favorite line is also people saying like, it just happened, and I'm like, no, it didn't just happen. Like things happened to get there. Okay, if it's a red flag, if it has you lying or hiding from those you love the most and who love you, if he doesn't support your faith, says like, why do you go to church? That's weird. If he's always trying to push you further, I say he, I'm speaking for myself. Sorry, gentlemen, I know you're better than that. And I pray that you're better than that. And then green flags are just doing things, encouraging your faith, going out in public, hanging out in public. And yeah, all right, everyone, thank you so much. And I could clearly talk for longer. Last thing, here's some great books. And if great books here, there's Guys, Girls, Theology of the Body book, really amazing. Thank you all for joining me.